Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together. Welcome to The View from TribePad, and today I am chatting with Emma Freivogel. Emma leads two organisations called Radical Recruit and Be Radical, and we are chatting today about the case for radical talent. What is radical talent, I might hear you ask, and why would I care? Radical talent is all of those people who are from diverse backgrounds, who've been left out of society and find it really difficult to get into meaningful work. So if you're interested in a conversation about how meaningful work can transform lives, then this is the conversation for you. My name's Neil Armstrong from TribePad. This is The View, where recruitment, people and purpose come together. Emma, firstly, thanks for joining.
Yeah, nice to see you again, mate. It's been, what, 3 years?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Too long. Do you know, I think I said, yeah, like I just went along with the Aussie accent there. So
I'm going to rub off on you. You'll be Aussie in no time.
Well, let's dive into that. Before we get into your sort of your background in Australia and how you got to where you are, radical talent. What is radical talent, and why should people in HR and recruitment care about it?
Yeah, good question. So radical talent, when I refer to radical talent, I refer to two distinct groups of people whose potential is under-recognised and who are therefore underrepresented in the labour market. So to give an example, I'm talking about people who should enjoy protections under the law because they are classified as belonging to a protected class.
Yeah.
Thinking about your disabled and neurodivergent communities, women, your over 50s, the global majority population, queer folk, those people that we sort of refer to when we talk about diversity.
Yeah.
And then also we work with, or we represent talent who don't enjoy protections under the law, but who are, as underrepresented and as misunderstood, I think. So I'm talking about individuals who have had usually really adverse life experiences, like contact with the criminal justice or care systems, having survived domestic violence and abuse, refugees, returned veterans, folks who, for lots of different reasons, struggle to often get a job in the first instance, or return after a period of absence, or who are very often kept in underemployment because they're not valued in the same way as their more traditional, white, male, non-disabled counterparts.
Okay. And so how did you get into this? I mean, where did your career start, and what's led you to this point of working with radical talent?
Oh, I totally blame my mother for being there for all of the time and not sleeping for the last 5 years. So my mum, Jude, I think I just followed in her footsteps. She was like the youngest of 7 children born into generational poverty. Her parents were English, actually, and they came over to Australia and they were treated terribly for being different, not fitting the popular mold, radical, probably, you could call them. And, she was raised on hand-me-downs and, borrowed everything, and I think one of the things that I learned very early on was that having a safe place to live and 2 loving parents and, someone to believe in me and all of that sort of stuff were all sort of incredible privileges that my mum didn't really have. So I think from a very early age, I learned what it meant to respect people and offer them the dignity that respect leads to, no matter where you're from or what you look like or how you sound. So I sort of followed in her footsteps. I started off in a disability support worker role, and I was born with the gift of the gab and the ability to say pretty much anything with my chest and have people believe me, which is kind of cool and very helpful at the start of my career. And very quickly moved into leadership roles. So I've worked in lots of different capacities over the last 20 odd years. I started work when I was 3, Neil.
Wow. What were you doing at 3 then? The gift of the gab really?
Well, I only started 20 years ago, so it must have been about and became acutely aware of the fact that you cannot possibly live a good life if you don't have a job that offers fair pay and in exchange for like meaningful work, work that you want to get up out of bed to do and work that enables you to pay the bills and feed your kids and, go on holidays and all this stuff that makes life great. So I guess before I started Radical, I worked as a COO for a really small grassroots women's charity. And our remit was to support women coming out of prison to find employment, refrain from reoffending, reintegrate back into the community, take up the roles that they had pre-prison, and in theory, walk with purpose into their future. But the challenge was that we were a charity that knew nothing about recruitment, the mechanics of recruitment. We certainly couldn't work at the pace that a meaningful recruitment partner would or should work at.
Yeah.
And we sort of applied this throw mud at a wall, hope some of it sticks approach with humans.
Yep.
And of course, everyone's investment was far from protected. And very often the placement didn't stick, or the person was placed into a role that didn't, utilize their many transferable skills, didn't even nod to their potential, totally ignored the fact that they had careers prior to prison, and therefore they were in work poverty. So working, but still bloody poor, still couldn't pay the bills, still couldn't go on the holiday, still couldn't feed their kids.
And was this in Australia, or is this when you sort of relocated to London?
No, that was in London. And I mean, they did some really great work, but not every time. We're placing 400 women into work. We placed 400 women into work over the 2 years. But through that experience, I learned very quickly that, paid work has the power to transform lives.
Yeah.
And it is, without work and without a sense of purpose, you don't live life with any dignity, and that's such a waste of human potential. Not least, and obviously there are a whole load of sort of economic challenges associated with people not working, all that stuff too. But I was really interested in human. So I started Radical with a view to plugging the gap in third sector ecology.
Yeah. And what was that gap you saw? That you talk about plugging the gap. Are there sort of big organizations and government and prison and recruitment agencies, and it wasn't quite working as you saw it? What was the gap you saw?
The challenge for the third sector is we are not corporate recruiters. We're not private recruiters. So there's a huge amount of work that needs to take place before an introduction can be made between a candidate and an employer to ensure that that candidate is work and interview ready. And on the other side, there's a huge amount of work that needs to take place to ensure most employers are what we call radical ready. So they really empathise with the challenges that radical talent face when applying for jobs, when interacting with your recruiters, when showing up for assessments, interviews, and then obviously starting well and onboarding and sustaining sort of placements and hopefully progressing careers. So what happens is that the business community partners with third sector organisations, charities and social enterprise out of goodwill generally, and the expectation for them to perform as a recruitment partner there isn't really. And the dynamic between the two organizations is completely fucked because you're doing good, but actually you're setting radical talent up to fail because you haven't done the work as a charity or as a prospect employer. And so what was happening is, the third sector places people into any job because any job's better than none, right? I don't agree with that, but anyway, and hope that it's a good fit without doing the work. So very often people don't last in the positions they take up, even if they've been won on merit, because the culture of the organisation isn't conducive with people who have tattoos on their necks or people who have trauma in their backgrounds and need really empathetic, congruent leadership that's sort of founded on unconditional regard. Like these are the things that radical people need. So that's the challenge, I think, the biggest one. It's this sort of, we do it because it's the right thing to do rather than we do it because there's this huge talent pool that charities could unlock. And they typically do a half-assed job because they just don't understand the challenges they're facing.
And so how do you see those challenges? I mean, let's think about it from the radical talent point of view first, and then perhaps we'll come on to the organization after that. As somebody, I've got radical talent from whatever my background is. What are the things I'm going to find hard in terms of finding meaningful work?
Oh, so many things. I mean, if we start with the individual, and we're speaking about radical talent very broadly, they tend to lack social capital. So like the bank of mum and dad or the introduction from the neighbour to the local branch manager for that workplace and this sort of thing. Very often they come from generational poverty and joblessness. So there's a serious lack of role models, people to sort of lead the way, to model. Confidence is a major issue with radical talent. If you look at, there's some great research out there that proves that men will apply for pretty much any job, whether or not they can, meet the essential and nice to have requirements. Whereas women, disabled people, non-white folks won't apply for the job if they don't, tick most or if not all the boxes. So that confidence piece, that self-belief piece is a massive challenge. Most of the people we support or represent have experienced trauma, whether it's a big T or a little t, it doesn't really matter. Trauma you don't sort of shake off, after a good night's sleep. It sort of shapes the way you show up, and it's indelible. It's laces your life. So trauma is a really big challenge because most corporate environments aren't trauma-informed environments, so they're not creating environments where radical people will flourish. Representation, if you're a young person or a black person or a disabled person and you land on the website of a prospect employer who's got a brilliant job and all you see is white guys in suits who are middle-aged and none of them look disabled, do
I belong? Is this going to be a fit for me?
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of things. I mean, that's just scratching the surface in terms of the challenge. And then there's access to like resources, like the ability to pay for a bus fare to get to the 13th interview that you feel like you're probably going to fail. There's things like access to Wi-Fi, access to laptops, the ability to write a decent CV that's ATS optimized, the ability to navigate through a competency-based interview that is designed for neurotypical, very boring brains. So all of these things layer up, right? And then obviously there's that piece around like well, I've been told over and over and over again, I'm never going to amount to anything. What am I good at?
So a whole load of, lots of very, very real barriers, physical, logistics, resources, and then the fear, the confidence, But
then there's a systemic stuff as well. It's like, my business partner, Kirsty, is partially sighted. So she has a computer that reads the text that's on her screen, whether it's an email that's come in or she's typing it, it'll read it. I mean, it drives me friggin' nuts because she's got two phones, both talk to her, and a laptop. If I'm on the phone, they're all going. And one of them's got an Indian accent, the other one's got another accent, so she can tell the two different, someone like Kirsty would need accommodations in a application process potentially, because if your career site isn't accessible, has no accessibility plugin, she couldn't press the apply button. She couldn't find it because her screen is magnified to like 200. So, a letter A that would normally be this big is this big. So she can see it. So there's no way she's going to find that apply button on your career site without some accessibility or tech support or a support worker helping her. And can I just say, she's the most amazing, talented person I would hire 20 times if I could. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's that sort of thing. And then there's a bit around like, okay, well, how are we talking about diversity? How is the way we talk about diversity and accessibility perceived by the candidates? You've got all these little things, like every bloody business insists on putting some bog standard boilerplate, disclaimer, we encourage applications from all sections of the society.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Are you talking about ex-offenders? Are you talking about old women with caring responsibilities? Are you talking about, women who are planning to have families? Probably not.
Yeah.
So this sort of stuff, it's throwaway, it's performative, it's tokenistic. And because radical communities have had so bloody much of it, they lack confidence in the brands that are talking, that spout this rhetoric, but cannot prove that they take action. So, I mean, there are so many things I could go on.
A lack of authenticity leading to a lack of trust, right?
Yeah, but also intent. Is that a word? Intentionality?
Intentionality. I think let's say yes.
We'll coin it, you and I together. So, like, there's this like cookie cutter approach that we spoke about it. No, that was another call. Sorry, I'm getting our calls mixed up. Apologies. I was speaking to a prospect this morning. She's a consultant, a sustainability consultant working with different organizations, got ESG on the agenda. And she was reflecting on the conversation she'd been having with her clients about diversity. They're not diversity experts, they're in the market for one. Yeah. And I, asked the question, what does diversity look like when you're talking about diversity? And they all say the same thing, more women, obviously, and more folks that don't have white skin.
Yeah, we certainly found that we at TribePad, we did some research into what ESG DEI initiatives recruiters are working on. Yeah, and straight away they focus on gender, ethnicity. A small number of people were working on disability, and then it tailed off pretty quickly. And then you ask candidates what they care about, and it's age, it's family, appearance, and actually, candidates were less worried about gender and ethnicity, and so a real mismatch there of
I think the recruitment industry, we haven't done anything different for like 40 odd years. I'm going to put it out there. It needs a shake up. I think we need to really think differently about what top talent looks like and how to assess and engage and really bring out the potential of people, because we're all suffering the same challenges around labor and skill shortages, progression, retention, all of that stuff. And I can assure you that someone who has been discarded on the talent scrap heap because they are too old or they don't look the part, they can find a home, a work home, a place where they feel valued, they're remunerated fairly, and they've got meaningful work, they will stay with you forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
The risk of leaving comes with the probability that they might be discriminated against. So I think we need to shake up sort of what is diversity, who is diverse, and why is it important in the context of the business case? Because, until then, it's going to be a nice to have. It won't be a business imperative. And the people who with influence and who should be sponsoring this work really don't understand who is diverse or who could be diverse in their organization, the strength and the amazing assets they bring, and what that could do for business's bottom line. It's madness.
Well, let's come back to the sort of the business case and the drivers behind this in a second. You were touching on sort of the barriers and difficulties for the radical talent. What are the challenges that organizations face? You said they're not ready, they're not set up, they're not ready to. They haven't got the right things in place to help radical talent succeed. What do organizations need to be doing to help that, improve that outcome?
I think there are two really big stumbling blocks. So I would say the majority of organizations that we speak to don't know where they are on the map. And they come to us and they say, we want to be here. Yeah. We want to be, these are the aspirations. This is what we want to achieve in the next year, 18 months, 3 years, whatever. Yeah. And then our immediate response is always like, okay, but where are you currently? They don't have a grip on their data. So it's very difficult to help an organization or to do it for yourself.
The data is in, what does our workforce look like right now? And what is our
who's in it, who's not in it?
Yeah.
Who's coming in? Where are they getting stuck? Why are we converting, these applications? Who's making the decision making? So they don't have the data, because they don't know how to define diversity, often going back to that conversation around, okay, well, who is diverse? Women, Black people. So they're not asking the questions, and therefore they cannot plan a route to where they want to be. Yeah. It's impossible. I think there's, this school of thought that in order to do diversity well, you have to spend huge amounts of money and have, a 5-year plan and all of these things, when actually, if you look at diversity through an equity lens, there are so many things that organizations can be doing at all levels that don't cost huge amounts of money, that are easy to implement, don't take huge amounts of time, that make everyone's tomorrow a hell of a lot better, radical or not. Yeah. So I'll give you an example of what that might look like. It's like a really a well thought through sort of application process, for example. Yeah. Having an accessibility plugin is having a number to call for candidates who are not sure if they would be a good fit. It's these types of things. It doesn't cost the world.
And I mean, interestingly, we're seeing less and less of that. So one of the, I was going to come on to sort of AI and technology impacts later, positive and negative. But that phone number idea is a really interesting one, and one I would say we see fairly rarely, because increasingly talent teams are time poor, resource stretched, getting more and more applications, and sort of almost making themselves less accessible And so I wonder if that's having a worse impact on radical talent than it is, the general talent pool.
I don't think radical talent has ever had a number to call.
Yeah.
I'm honest. Yeah. I don't think that's ever been something that's offered, broadly speaking. I think it would make a huge difference to a lot of people if they could pick up the phone and explain their circumstances and have a conversation about reasonable adjustments or the likelihood that flexible working would be, suitable for this, whatever it is that they need.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing that really where organisations come unstuck is there's a lack of understanding by the executive and their team about the link between diversity and the rest of the business. So it's not sponsored by the executive often. It's poorly researched or not at all. Then I can't tell you the number of times we've approached by someone who's got, is a diversity lead, but they're also the head of marketing for a multinational or global company, and they don't have enough people in their marketing team, much less people to delegate the work to from a diversity perspective. So, my feeling always with those sorts of organizations is like, how serious are you? Is this a for show thing? Or, so having that sponsorship, it being appropriately resourced and having really tangible, actionable plans that mature over time. So you can see, at least then you've got a baseline. This is where we are and this is where we want to be in 3 years' time. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And then having sort of experts come in and really support the delivery of that work, because it's not easy. You can't if you're wanting to attract more women into your business, you've got to write your adverts for women. You've got to state that there's a menopause policy and a maternity policy and a paternity policy and a IVF policy, if you've got them. You want to talk about the women in your business and how they're leading the way. So frequently that doesn't happen.
So who
working these sorts of things.
Who are you seeing getting it right then? I mean, not necessarily just some of your customers who obviously are going to be brilliant and doing an amazing job, but what sort of organizations who you are seeing who have really embraced it and are really seeing the benefits from it?
Good question. I mean, I don't believe a great deal of what I read online because I approach things with a healthy dose of cynicism.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we did a project with WPP a couple of years ago, and they came to us with the problem was that they were predominantly white, male, Red Brick University educated group of men in a IT transformation team.
Okay, so not quite like Mad Men advertising land of the 60s, smoking and drinking, but
in 30 years, yeah, absolutely, they would have been, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And so our brief was, we want more diversity. Again, couldn't sort of articulate what that would be, but we knew who was in the team and who we thought would be great to bring in. And so what we did with that business is and there was a disconnect between HR and the hiring managers. So HR were driving the diversity sort of initiatives.
Yeah.
HR managers just needed capable bums on seats to do the bloody work. They're this big global matrix organization. So we did a huge amount of work with them to help them to think about, okay, who is diverse? What are the challenges they face? And how are we going to accommodate those in every juncture in our marketing, recruitment, onboarding, support and development process? And we helped them to reimagine that completely with the personas of the people they want more of in their business, in mind. So we looked at it through a disabled person's lens. We looked at it through a homeless person's lens, an ex-offender's lens, a women's lens, a Black person's lens. Took that campaign to market through all manner of different routes. So we've got a really strong brand on LinkedIn, did lots of storytelling there. We've got around 2,000 sort of inclusion partners who help us market the vacancies we're working on to different people that they're supporting, jobs briefing calls, all sorts of things. Ended up supporting 42 candidates to put in an application for one of the 12 vacancies. So they were project management vacancies, workday training coordinators, loads of analysts, these types of sort of gigs. And all 42 got a first round interview.
Wow, fantastic. And the 42 getting the interview, do you think that was
It was a graduate
got-
program, and most of them weren't grads. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. And so and part of that reimagination sort of process was to look at their JDs, strip it back completely and ask the question, what do you actually need in this role?
Yeah.
Can we find those skills, those experiences out of sector or through less traditional sort of routes, you know, not academic routes? So they 42 got first round interviews, and then we booked like 170 or 80 second round interviews because the candidates they got were capable and the jobs were entry level jobs all of a sudden. And we placed 12 radicals. Now, over
Excellent.
2 years on, 11 are still in post, 2 have had promotions. WPP did a really great thing in the sense that they got rid of that grad requirement. They did not need graduate degrees, no way.
Yeah.
They were explicit. We don't have Black people, we don't have disabled people, we don't have, you know, women, we don't have blah 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 in the business. If you fit this profile and you think you've got most of what we say we need, apply.
Yep.
They designed, or we co-designed the assessments with them so that accessibility was at the forefront, and we facilitated conversations between their team and our candidates about you know, what a welcoming process would look like for individuals and how to accommodate them in that process. We did a whole load of like unconscious bias training with the hiring managers as well to help them think about who they were going to meet. And we supported them to start the candidates, their radical recruits, and sustain them in work. So we did intensive in-work support for 6 to 12 months after, and they can call us if they need us now. So that is a really great example of organisations putting their money where their mouth is and turning that rhetoric into, you know, meaningful action, and having that really holistic approach, because you only know what you know when it comes to any subject matter, but diversity in particular. People have this fear, oh God, I'm not an expert, I'm going to get it wrong. It's like,
and that fear of getting it wrong then just makes it easy to, well, I'll do that thing tomorrow instead of today. And you know, it's human nature, isn't it? When you're not confident of what you're going to do, it's easy to come up with a load of reasons why, you know, it's not quite right yet. Well, you know, it needs a bit more development. We'll pick up on that later, sort of.
Absolutely. But it's more than that. It's like, if you're a recruiter, the buck stops with you. So why would you hire the risky candidate when you've got another candidate who's just as qualified, who hasn't been to prison, or shows up and is a bit more sparkly? You know what I mean? Fits the you know, more of profile.
And that whole fear of failure thing, right? It's I'm sure it's something like 9 times more powerful than the prospect of success is the fear of failure, or something. It's something like that. And as you say, if you're in recruiting or resourcing, whatever, you're maxed out. You've got hiring managers screaming that the vacancy's been open for too long. DEI is going to be a secondary. You know, it becomes a nice to have at that point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the thing is, we turned that campaign around in about 5 weeks, I think, which is, I mean, you should have seen us. I was mid meltdown. So I was burned out. I lost my fucking mind. I took flights back home for some TLC with my mum. because I hadn't had a break for 3 years in the pandemic, saving homeless people off the street, if you can imagine. And I was working at like 4 a.m. in the morning because my mum's in New Zealand, and I'm trying to get these bloody interviews scheduled and candidates prepped. But the reason I use that case study is because WPP acknowledged that there were challenges internally, systemic challenges, challenges with their policy, there were challenges with the way that their processes, the way they recruited. There was bias in all of them. There was bias in their recruiters. And so they made a conscious effort to do the uncomfortable and completely reimagine everything. And they wrapped all of their people in support with training.
Yeah.
And it made that process, there was an appreciation between HR and, you know, the hiring managers for this sort of work that HR were leading. And there was true surprise and shock, because the people that they met were exceptional. We prepped them to the hilt.
Sure.
As we always do with our candidates. But even so, you know, some of the things that they were reflecting on in terms of the stuff that they'd done well or achieved. I mean, we had one guy that was involved in writing the Equality Act. Who can say that in an interview?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And another guy, you know, broken world records for, I can't remember what sport it was, athletics, something. These things really cool. And they weren't expecting that.
Yeah.
And it just and a commitment to sort of working with us to iterate, get it right, and then keep these people in post. And we didn't have any issues, not one issue.
It sounds like it's been really successful. I mean, you mentioned you got a strong brand and a good following on LinkedIn, and part of that is that storytelling. And some of those stories of the candidates, radical candidates who are working with you, are pretty harrowing. How do you navigate that in terms of the sort of emotional burden of supporting these radical candidates and the lines between personal and private and work and business must become incredibly blurred?
It's hard. I mean, I remember when I first started my career, I got a leadership role. I was managing a 10-bed hostel for men who come out of prison, had drug and alcohol related brain injury, severe in some instances. And the house was it was a former brothel. It was in Richmond, in Melbourne, so inner city. And I mean, you couldn't get reception on the top level, and it was just rooms, down off of hallways. And I remember feeling just inherently sad for months and months and months. And I would go home and cry. Neil, and I wasn't a cry. I'm a crier now in my old age. Good for you.
I thought you were 23.
Yeah, that was a lie. But yeah, I remember going home and thinking, these poor bastards, they deserve better than what we can give them. And no one gave a shit about them. I think that's the hardest part. It's like when you really care and you see those people get hurt over and over and over again with the same systems, the same structures, the same jerks, perpetuating the racism, perpetuating the homophobia, perpetuating the whatever it is.
Yeah.
That is devastating. Because they struggle. It's like when the world's not built for you with your success in mind, everything's a fucking battle, that is incredibly and inherently unfair.
Yeah.
And then there's a bit around, what's happened to them before they get to us. And I mean, the stories can be really devastating, but mostly they finish with success.
Yeah.
And I think through those experiences, I mean, I'm incredibly empathetic to lots of different experiences because I've had to be in my work now. Experiences you've probably not even considered. We had one young person, he'd been in foster care, and his foster parents used to tie him to a chair and leave him there in a room by himself. He was a kid, The woman who inspired Radical Recruit, her mum used to call her fat and restrict access to the cupboards. So she was forced to prostitute herself out to men in order to eat. Like the shit that happens to these people is you don't see in horror movies. It can be that bad.
Yeah.
But I think, it's a real privilege to do this work and to not have walked in their shoes. So part of the job is obviously empathizing with people, but you don't have the right to feel embarrassed for them. You don't have the right really to feel sad for them or, pity them or any of that, because they're the ones in it.
Yeah. And they don't want that, right?
Yeah. As a professional, the people we support, they want work. So we focus on that. Obviously we where possible, we detect any potential barriers and we mitigate the risk of those, cropping up. But for the most part, we really focus on flipping the script and reframing the narrative about homelessness, about domestic violence, about blah, blah, blah. Because these people have just been seen through deficits lenses for their entire existence.
Yeah.
Often.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. That's not how any human should feel or be viewed. So, yeah, we try and really paint our radicals in an empowering position, do everything we can to mobilise them up and into better sort of positions and help others to use their privilege to do the same.
Yeah. So meaningful work, transforming lives. That the sell for the radical talent is obvious. How about to the organization, right? If there's somebody in talent acquisition out there, listening, watching to this, thinking this sounds amazing. How do I get my business on board with this, knowing we're short of time and money and resource poor? How do I sell this to management? What's the business case for the organization as to why they should invest time and resource into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the business case, there's so many sort of thoughts that I could offer. I think it depends on the nature of the business, obviously. If your organization bids for government contracts, for example, one of the biggest, I guess, selling points for recruiting radically is that for every radical you recruit and who sustains their placement within your organization for 6 months, 12 months, whatever, there is a measurable social value that you create by employing that person. So to give an example, I really explained that terribly, but I'll give you an example.
That's fine.
Okay. To acknowledge that I'm willfully, then pretend I'm not. So, for example, we did a project with Greater London Authority and St Mungo's in the height of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We worked with a number of organisations. Marston Holdings was one of them. Ironically, they're an enforcement agency. Mighty and Compass Group. So both those two facilities management. So between them and a handful of other employers, they employed 45 men and women who were rough sleeping in the height of the pandemic. So on the streets, homeless.
Yeah.
Now, these men and women were EU nationals. So their only solution to homelessness would be to find work and pay their own way because they would never have recourse to public funds.
Yeah.
What happened was the government, in their wisdom, in the name of public health, took almost all of the rough sleepers off the streets during its 3 night street sweep and gave them respite and student accommodation.
Yeah.
So our job was to work with 60 odd of them to find them work. And these were people who were entrenched in homelessness like 10 years, a couple of them.
Yeah.
Who didn't speak English as a first language or at all, who didn't have CVs, who had no formal interview process, wouldn't know what a competency interview question was if it bit them on the arse. They'd been victims of modern day slavery and subject to all sorts of trauma on the streets and in different settings. And they were sending money back home. So they were providers, they were family, parents and carers and blah, blah, blah. So through that project, we created, it's a rough calculation, but we think around 3.1 million worth of social value. Okay. So if you're talking about social value, I'm talking about money that would have been spent if that person, so taxpayer money, would have been spent if that person remained on the streets and used emergency services 3 times in a year and relied on charity support and food banks and the state for benefits and blah, blah, blah. So that's money not spent. And then it's money that goes back into the pot because they're earning. So taxes now. And then there's a piece around community cohesion. Well, what does it cost? Every time a police officer gets called out, what does that cost the state? If this homeless person isn't drunk on the street, self-medicating on the street and causing a ruckus, the police station.
Yeah, absolutely.
So these are, mental illness reducers, all of this stuff. So if you can go to a government, a government bidding opportunity and you can say, I'm going to hire 10 men out of prison.
Yeah.
Then you could assign that, say, a 70K value over a year and build that 700K worth of social value into your bid.
Yeah.
That's huge. But there's other things. There's, the people that we work with, broadly speaking, I don't like to sort of tie them all with the same brush. And I hate the fact that we describe them as resilient, but I will because they are absolutely resilient. These people have been told time and time again, no, sorry, the inn's closed. There's no space for you here. So the fact that they can keep coming back and trying is a pretty good indication that they're really resilient, they're determined, they're gritty, and they want to work.
Yeah.
This workforce that's, jumping from job to job, 10p more and an hour in that sort of role. Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
So can you, when you're working with somebody new, do you have a process to go through where you sort of say, well, let's start with this is a good thing to do and we should be doing it. 2, it's a new source of talent for you to tap into those roles where it's hard to fill. 3, these people are going to come in with resilience and grit and emotional intelligence because they've survived all of these sort of traumatic, life experiences. You've then got the direct benefit in terms of your whatever ESG initiatives and scorecards and benchmarks you've got internally, your ability to win new business. And then one imagines this has to have a positive impact on, your employee value proposition, right? Where your current workforce sees you doing this. It's got to be a good thing. It's, I'm working for a company that genuinely cares and here's the proof points, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many benefits to doing this work. Businesses are not tracking the outcomes. They can't prove the return on investment. Therefore, they don't have a strong business case for further investment the next year or the next project or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's where things are going wrong. It's that data piece and having the executive sort of bought in. So yeah, in terms of sort of where it depends on the organization and their journey. I mean, I like starting with the executive team. I like getting the FD, you know, good old Pete, who's, you know, 60 years old. He's been there for 20 years and he just doesn't know why we're working with Radical Recruit, because what do they get? They don't bring in money. And so I explained the piece around the social value, Pete, and how it will strengthen your financial position and blah, blah, blah. And also, you know, these investors are interested, whatever. And then it might be, you know, we're doing the work in the same sort of strategy session. We're helping the CEO to carve out his or her role. Because he knows it's important, but he doesn't know just how important. And, you know, she doesn't realize that actually she has to lead by example. There has to be accountability for this work. You know, it can't be, everyone has to take a proportionate degree of responsibility. You need to be at the forefront. And then you've got the marketing person, and actually they're big part of, you know, employee engagement. Well, they need to be telling the stories. Then you've got the bid writer, who needs to understand that in order to work with an organization like mine, you need to plan this ahead of time. You need to really think about the problem you're trying to solve with this potential piece of work you're bidding for. So really, ideally, it starts with the executive team.
Yeah.
And it starts with a comprehensive strategy using whatever framework they want that is, you know, built with their values as a foundation. You know, is this innovative? No. Okay. We're not going to do it then. You know, people think, because organizations, oh yeah, we live our values, but actually they don't very often, you know.
Posters on the wall that nobody could really ascribe any value to.
Exactly. And yeah, it's flash on the wall. They look great, but what does it mean in practice? And then we sort of carve out these strategies and really actionable plans with exciting pieces of work and projects for people to get involved in, you know. And then it's a matter of obviously securing the resources to do the work we want to do, and bringing everyone in the organization on a journey. So helping them to understand what the opportunities are for them to get involved in the work and why they would, and how it's going to be great for them and the business, and getting people really excited. And again, you've got to find the language that speaks to people. You know, your risk person's only going to care about the stuff that's going to go wrong with your diversity work. So let's paint a picture, you know.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, you know, there's many benefits, financial, cultural, all that sort of stuff. So I guess I mean, firstly, look, wish you the very best of luck in growing your business, and that, you know, this mission to bring radical talent into the workplace and transform lives. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and certainly like to introduce you to all of TribePad's customers, because
I love that.
You've mentioned a couple there in already. So
good, cool.
So yeah, some really good overlaps. One thing that there's really like to get your opinion on. Obviously, everybody's talking about artificial intelligence at the moment, and, you know, recruiters getting swamped with, you know, twice the number of applications that all look the same because they've all been through ChatGPT. And depending on who you talk to and what they're trying to sell you, there's this narrative that, oh well, AI is going to make everything fair because it's going to remove the bias. But then I think back to what you were saying at the beginning of this call, where actually you've got radical talent who hasn't got Wi-Fi, hasn't got a laptop, doesn't know ChatGPT. It strikes me that there's just as much chance that AI is going to actually make the situation worse. Where do you currently sit on it? You know, what's your thought of this? Is life for your radical candidates going to get harder as AI rolls out and becomes mass market, or is it not that simple?
I don't think it's that simple. I mean, the thing is, you can put your CV through ChatGPT and it'll still just tell you what you supposedly did in your job. So unless the CV clearly articulates how you leveraged your skills to add value, what you achieved in that job, the recruiter is no more able to assess your capability to do what they need to do, you know, in the job. So I don't think, I mean, AI will make it look better and read better, absolutely. So, you know, people who aren't using AI in that context will, you know, won't come up on top. But does AI make your CV, does it strengthen your CV without you knowing what to tell it? Probably not. So if you haven't achieved anything, you haven't been good at your last jobs, or you don't know or don't feel comfortable talking about your achievements, then you're no better off with or without it, in my view. I think, you know, on the bias front, you can't just do one thing. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. Yes, use AI, absolutely. But also de-bias your policy and your processes, train your people, think about your marketing. It's just so much more nuanced than, will it fix this problem or not? I don't think AI is going to fix many, problems in recruitment, if I'm honest.
No, same here.
It really doesn't help bloody recruitment marketers write decent job specs or intriguing, engaging adverts or anything like that. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. So, obviously, knowing you've had really interesting, varied career history at a bunch of different organizations across several continents. If you could go back now and tell 20-year-old Emma a piece of advice that would be useful for her career, what would it be? Bearing in mind that's only 3 years ago for you,
Yeah, and I was very young at the time. Oh gosh, one piece of advice. I think I subconsciously was obsessed with the fact that I did not know what I was good at, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think I was actually asking myself the wrong question or worrying about the wrong thing, because what I think is more important when you're young or thinking about, your first career or sort of older and thinking about pivoting is like, what are you good at? Because we spend so much time at work, and doing something that is meaningful to you is so important. Likewise, doing it with people who genuinely care about each other and the mission, whatever that is, it doesn't have to be a human-centric mission, is equally as important, because you've got to work with these assholes as well. So I would have picked my employers and the people I work with, better, and I would have left, I think, leave if it's toxic. That would be the advice. Yeah. And don't obsess over having this long-term plan. Obsess over doing the things that you love doing.
Yeah. One step in front of the other, and make sure you're enjoying it.
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Emma, it's been really fascinating. Really enjoyed this conversation, and just really excited to see where the future for Radical, and hope that more organizations join you on this mission. So,
do you know what? We've just got, it's funny, we're at the end, we've done sort of 5 really hard years. We're now a charity. So we sort of relaunched last year. But the organizations we work with and the individuals within those organizations are just amazing. Like, they're the best of the best in terms of partners. So we're very, very lucky to do this work and have, a growing list of organizations who rely on us. So yeah, it's fantastic. Great. Thank you very much for your kind words. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Cheers. Speak to you soon.
Bye, mate.
My thanks to Emma Freivogel from Be Radical and Radical Talent. I hope you'll agree, some really fascinating and really meaningful stories and ideas there about how organizations can benefit from radical talent. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend. Visit us at tribepad.com/theview, where you can subscribe and get alerts for our next episodes.